thank you everyone who has joined this webinar. My name is Marian Fraterola Salino, and as Kaylee said, I'm the current board chair, and I'm one of the 4 founders of the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Support. So I could not be more thrilled to be here for what is really the reset of our meet and greet webinars focused exclusively on self-direction. We also have the honor and the benefit of having an ASL interpreter, Rain, and you all can see her. And thank you, Rain, so much for your generosity and your kindness in volunteering your time today to make sure that this webinar is accessible to all. I don't want to waste any more time because, you know, as I think we all are experiencing in this time and day, technology, we are relying on technology perhaps more so than some of us ever have. And again, I thank Kaylee for problem solving through a little bit of bump as we got here, but we want to devote as much of this time to our speaker as we possibly can. And Caroline, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please introduce yourself. And I like everyone else on here, I am just thrilled. I can't wait to hear your story. And then we will have time for questions and responses and discussion. And I will be reading some of the questions from our fellow board member, DJ Savarese. So Caroline, I will prompt those questions as DJ instructs me to do so. Other than that, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Marian. And thanks to the Alliance. It's wonderful to join you today. And I hope that some of my experiences and responses to your questions will be helpful to you in building an independent living situation for yourself. I am 54 years old. When I was 30, I was involved in a motor vehicle accident in which I sustained a spinal cord injury at the cervical level and went immediately then to requiring for the rest of my life attendant care. Now, while I was in the acute rehabilitation setting, of course, that's all provided for you, but once you're discharged, you kind of need to figure it out. The rehab hospital I was in did a really nice job, I think, the best they could, at preparing me for what seeking and receiving care would be like when I went home. I was living in Colorado at the time, and things went pretty smoothly. There were nursing assistants who came to my home, took care of me. Everyone was quite competent and managed by their own agency, and I simply welcomed them in and received care. Things changed a little bit for me when I moved to the Washington, D.C. area. And in Washington, nursing regulations don't permit nursing assistants to do some of the care I require. Furthermore, I had new health insurance, which was not going to cover attendant care the way it had in Colorado. And remember, this is back in the late 90s. So I became aware after moving here that I was going to need to become a self-directed manager of my own care services. I contacted a number of nursing agencies. They were really expensive. They had limitations on what they would or could do. I couldn't find anyone that was prepared to lift me from the bed to a commode, for example. And I started getting really discouraged. And that's when I found online a place in a town nearby called the Independence Center. And the Independence Center of Northern Virginia, ECNV, is an organization that's part of the Centers for Independent Living. They're a nonprofit that whole mission is to provide supports to enable people with disabilities to live independently. And they had, and still maintain, a list of people who are willing personal care assistants looking for work. And this seemed like salvation to me. Everything's going to be fine now. I got the list and I started making phone calls, and nobody was calling me back. But with persistence, the 10th person I called did call me back. And I invited her for an interview, and she was a lovely person, seemed like a good fit for me, and I hired her and quickly dove into learning how to be a household employer. I've been very, very lucky since then, because that same person still works for me as a personal care assistant. So we've just passed 20 years together. And when I've needed additional care, thanks to her, I've met family members and colleagues and acquaintances of hers that I've also been able to hire. So I have a company, if you will, of 3 personal care assistants who help me with activities of daily living. And like I said, I've been very lucky, because it's not often that there's such longevity among assistants. Relationships tend to ebb and flow, and turnover tends to be high. So my story has a happy ending for me, and while sure there have been frustrations and bumps along the road, I've managed with surprising to me success. Marion, I'm not sure I could go into more detail with that sort of background, or take some questions now, however you would like to see this proceed.
Caroline, I just noted in the chat when you said that you are embarking on your 20-year anniversary with one of your supporters. I put wow, because it's just something in the disability support field that we are continually challenged with. And so when we hear of people having such incredible success like this, I know one of my first, and I said, oh, I'm going to remember this for when we're taking questions, is, can you talk with us a bit about what you think has enabled the longevity of those relationships? That's my first question. And maybe that, again, prompts you to talk more, and then I'm checking the chat for anything that comes up now. So participants, please feel free to put in the chat anything that's emerging for you now, because Caroline is an amazingly responsive speaker, and sounds like we can just have more or less an open conversation.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, what is the secret sauce? What have I found that is keeping this working so well? Part of what I think got us off on the right foot, so to speak, is that when my first care attendant started on the job, I just needed assistance in the mornings. I was married at the time of my injury, and my husband was taking care of care at night. So I just needed assistance in the mornings. And so timing wise, it was very convenient for her to quickly come and get me going in the morning, and then go off to the other jobs that she had that took place basically full time during the rest of the day. And so it was an easy way for her to just, make some extra cash. I think perhaps that our relationship was made stronger by the fact that not long after she started working with me, she lost her father to an illness. And in her culture, she's from Western Africa, it's very common for there to be monetary gifts when someone loses a close family member. And so I gave her a monetary gift out of sort of respect and to honor her loss. She was very grateful. I have no idea if that kicked us off on what turned out to be my 20-year success story, but it's emblematic of something that I feel like has been glue keeping us together. And that is getting to know these people and showing them that I care about them also. It's not just all about me taking from them. And I know she was very appreciative of that. We talked and talked, chatted, got to know each other. I met her daughter, who was 3 at the time, terrified of my cat. But, you know, we talked about that. We talked about growing up in Africa. We talked about what it was like to move to the United States. I told her about what I used to do, etc. And over time, you build a relationship with people. So it's not just sort of an employer-employee thing anymore. It's people helping people they care about. That seems to me to be the kind of the main thing I've thought to myself that I want to use to nurture these relationships.
Thank you, Caroline. And I'm gonna jump around a bit in the chat because we do have some other questions, but Leslie is responding to your response. So I'll share that now with the group. Thank you, Leslie. Leslie says, I'm a staff person, and I find that, as Caroline said, when you invest in staff in a respectful and meaningful way, it does foster a level of commitment from staff to employer. A relationship is developed. And Caroline, I see you shaking your head. So would you like to respond to what Leslie has said?
Yeah, Leslie, thank you for that comment. You know, having been with caregivers now for 20 years, I've heard lots of stories from the people that they have also cared for. And yeah, there are some people who are sort of owly and kind of grumpy and maybe don't treat them the way they would like it to be. They're dedicated people and they keep showing up to the job, but it doesn't take a whole lot to give up a grumpy patient and look for another position. So I really appreciate that. And another sort of tip I would offer is to remember that people want to be treated with respect and kindness. And I always try to keep that in mind, even when I'm grumpy and something's irritating me and that's not being done the way I like it to be done. You know, think to yourself, all right, is this really worth sort of bickering over, or do I focus on the things that are really important to me? And what's really important to me, and I thought about this on the advice of someone with an injury very much like mine, what's really important to me is that I'm safe, sort of medically tended to, and prepared for the day. If I get those things, I'm good. And as my friend advised me many years ago, she's like, and the rest of it, sometimes you just have to let it go. And that was well before Frozen advised us to let it go, right? But yeah, you think that song comes up in one's head from time to time. So thanks for that comment, Leslie.
Leslie, yes, thank you for that. And thanks, Caroline. And Santa says it's a two-way relationship.
Yeah. And, with 20 years, you start to actually almost feel like family. And we do. And so my ladies, I call them, have really pitched in times of need to help. When a few years ago, my mother was quite ill and came from Florida, her home, to my area for a visit, which turned into a hospitalization, which turned into a nursing and skilled nursing facility / rehab stay, which turned into mom just wanting to get the heck out of there. And so we decided she'd come live with me. And my ladies pitched in and provided the 24-hour care in my home that she needed, along with still covering me. One of them happily was underemployed at the time, so it was good for her too. She needed a lot more hours. But the other two also kind of rearranged their whole schedule so that they could be here for her, not just for her though, for me. And I was freaked out. Oh no, I don't know how this is going to work. How am I going to manage her care? And they're like, don't worry, we got you. We got you. And so I do believe that turning it into more than a business transaction is really important.
Thank you, Caroline. So we have a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
You choose to spend quite a bit of your day without assistance from a support person. During the pandemic, that means you're home alone in your apartment for most of the day. Can you talk about why you decided to do this? I'll start there. There's a couple more questions embedded in that. If you're comfortable,
sure, yeah,
respond to one and then I'll ask the next.
All right. So even before the pandemic, I was able to and chose to work from home, at least 1 to maybe 3 days a week. And I had found even prior to that, that if I was set up properly in the morning with lunch, let's say, somewhere where I could reach it, with the instruments I would need or the equipment I would need somewhere where I could reach it, that I was able to make it through the day without assistance. And that's, I like doing things on my own if I can, and sort of stay safe and medically stable. And so that's what I choose. But quite honestly, there's also a financial aspect to this as well. And when you're paying by the hour out of your own pocket, it can get pricey, especially in an expensive area like DC is. And so that's part of it. Sure, it would be way more convenient for me sometimes if there were someone here all day just in case I drop my lunch, or if I need someone to pull a cord out of my computer. That's true. Those can be frustrations for me when I'm on my own. But on balance, those little crises happen rarely enough that I've still chosen to sort of slog it out on my own. And it works out pretty well. And you learn tricks, right? Have 2 lunches, or have another laptop that you could drag off the shelf if you need to. And I will say also, I live in a condo with interior halls. So I have about 10 neighbors who live on my hall. And even before COVID-19, at least one of them was probably teleworking while I was. And so if I really needed something, I can just pop out of my door and knock on doors until I find someone and say, hey, would you help me? And I've asked for all kinds of crazy things, like get my coffee out of the microwave, get my cat in the cat carrier. He's got to go to the vet. And just last week, I dropped my laptop and didn't have a spare. So went and found a neighbor, and she came and picked it up for me. Yeah, so choosing more independence is kind of good for my mental health, but it's also good for my pocketbook.
Thank you. Really important points. And you did hit on some of the few more kind of comments or questions that were in that one chat. And that was, what natural supports do you have in place if you suddenly need assistance with something? And I think you've given some examples about that. So some of the thinking is, I guess I would add on a question to that. Did you deliberately think about living in a place where you are close to other people, as opposed to, say, living in a private home where you may not be physically as close to others?
It certainly keeps me here. That I can't say I was thinking that well in advance when I chose to live here, but it is keeping me here for sure. And much as I would like kind of the dream house with my picket fence and my little vegetable garden in the back, I recognize that that's not maximally safe for me. And it's probably not going to be something I would actually pursue. Yeah, having accessible neighbors, not only are they nearby, but they're all their floor plans look like my floor plan. So I don't have to worry about my neighbor's steps, you know, in front of their front door, or you know, whether their gravel driveway is something that I could maneuver my chair over. So having accessible, built-in informal supports has been a big sort of a safety net for me, and part of my kind of self-engineered independence plan.
I know you're helping me as a provider of services. So folks come to us and you know, say, hey, you know, I need this or I need that, and already so much of what you have said has been extremely helpful from my provider perspective. So thank you for that. And I think too, oftentimes, at least in the paid system, there's so much of a focus on recruiting paid supporters and what does that system look like for you, that we've really neglected the importance of neighbors, of living in a place where you can go and say, hey, can you help me get my coffee out of the microwave? I mean, just that example, because it's a universal example of things that at any point in time anybody could need something, and how great it is when you have neighbors who are there to help. Was there anything, I'm going to kind of keep jumping off these questions, if that's okay with you, and then we've got some more in the chat, which I'll get to. But hopefully the participants are finding this helpful in terms of kind of segueing from one idea to the next, because I know hopefully it's creating a picture for folks the way it is for me. But were you intentional in meeting your neighbors? You know, in this day and age, for a lot of us, even though we live in close proximity to other people, we may not really ever see people that we live physically close to. Was that part of your strategy? Was, I'm going to be intentional about meeting my neighbors and making myself known, or did that happen more naturally?
I'll say that it happened naturally at first. You know, my my grand plan has sort of evolved over time, and maybe things happened that I wasn't actually trying to do intentionally, but that I was just lucky to benefit from. And I had a couple of lucky things happen. So just because these are fun stories. One is that my first aide, when I interviewed her, I asked her, have you ever cared for someone with a spinal cord injury before? And she said, oh, I'm thinking, of course she hasn't, right? It's like, yeah. In fact, she's about your age, and her injury looks a lot like yours. You're kidding me. I'll call her up for a reference. Yes, please. She's my reference. And I got her on the phone, and we talked about our employee in a formal way. And then I said, I'm new in town, and I think we have a lot in common. You want to meet? And she said yes, and we've been friends ever since. She was my first friend in town. And she had been injured for at least 10 or 15 years by the time I met her. So she had lots of advice and was able to kind of show me the ropes about living with disability in this area. She also introduced me to her friends, and you know how that works. When your social network is growing, you find a lot more opportunities for friendships, which also are opportunities for supports. Another lucky thing happened that when I moved into this building, there was a woman about my age with a spinal cord injury, about like mine, in the same building. So we became friends, and she told me about how to get around in our own neighborhood. And finally, when I first moved here, coincidentally, there were about 5 single women my age. And at that time I was functionally single because my husband, I was married at the time, but he was crazy busy with work and school, and I basically never saw him. And so these 5 women and I felt like we were living in the dorms. It was so fun. And you just go out in the hallway and there's another friend. And so I did try to cultivate those friendships and learned through them that, just like building a relationship with a caregiver is important, building a relationship with your neighbors can be very important. And I would include that in a strategy now if I were consciously developing a strategy, definitely.
That's so helpful, Caroline. And that's where I was going with it. And Leslie, I wonder if you are too. You've identified, yourself as a staff member. But yeah, I think to your point, Caroline, that oftentimes system professionals, we look to the system and we miss out on all of these opportunities for literally the who and the what are right there, right there in front of us. So thank you for that. I think that was really helpful. DJ says, when I was being recruited to work for the federal government, I was told they would pay for any and all assistance I required, both at my job and at home. Were you offered similar benefits? And if so, did you turn them down in order to retain the personal control you have over the support you receive?
So thanks for that question. I sought work with government because, actually that was part of my grand plan. Working for the federal government has stability built in, and also good benefits and a really nice health insurance program. So that was kind of part of my conscious plan. And I was lucky enough to be offered a full-time position in government. In fact, though, not until after signing up to be a summer student, believe it or not. Just kind of one of those things, right? You never know how your life is going to turn when you make certain choices. But anyway, so the way our agency handles reasonable accommodations is that there's a process, there's a request is made by the employee who needs assistance, and certain evaluations, I think, are conducted, and if the needs, and this is all ADA law, which I studied but many years ago, you know, if they're reasonably practicable and not unduly hard for the employer to provide, then they provide them. And almost nothing is too hard for the government to supply. So I think they would, had I needed personal supports, I think they would provide them for free. But I feel like I don't need them. I'm able to function on my own at home, and therefore I'm pretty confident I can function on my own at work. At work, I have even more neighbors, right? There's the door next door. There's our assistant. When I meet people, I'm like, you know what? Knowing me is going to add a little bit to your job description, because if you're the first person that comes by after I've dropped my typing stick, I'm going to bring you in, and you're going to need to pick it up for me. Service dog, I had a service dog, which is also very helpful. A wonderful experience. Can't tout that enough. But after I got so busy at work and I was usually in the office, all the other employees were like my service dogs. So I after I lost my NASH, I didn't sign up for another one. But interestingly enough, one of the people I met when I first moved here, over the course of our friendship, she got a new job with the government, and she did require essentially someone to attend work with her throughout the workday. And that was provided. She worked for the U.S. Marshal Service.
I'm muted. I was like, wait, I got some questions. So, and maybe you can answer this using your friend as an example. So the government's assistance that's provided in the form of a person, a staff, an attendant, a supporter, how much control do you have over who that person is and what they do in terms of assisting you? And again, if maybe not using you as an example, is there any insight you can offer maybe from others that you know? It's an interesting interesting accommodation, but I think this goes to DJ's point too. Are you giving up some level of control when somebody else is saying we're going to provide the benefit, or not even a benefit? I'm sorry, I misspoke. The accommodation.
The accommodation. So that actually, I wasn't thinking of it that way, because there is another way that this could be approached. Is I could say I need an accommodation with a support person with me when I'm at work, but I want to provide that support person, and I'm going to be, well, and even that might be possible. The thing is, lots of things are possible if you just work with your employer. So I could say, I need a support person. I want to choose the support person. I want to be reimbursed for paying that support person. I don't want them working for you. I want them working for me. But I also, since it's something I need to work, I think you should be responsible for that. I'm just making this up right now, but that potentially could fly. And you may need special permission, like that person would have to get the security badge or something, right? They would have to be accepted as someone in the workplace, depending on where you work. But that potentially could work. And to tell you the truth, I can't really state facts because I just don't know them. My friends, I know that someone was working with her, but I don't know how exactly that person was selected or what might have happened if it didn't work out, if that sort of coupling didn't work out.
Well, thank you for taking that risk and just putting it out there. I think what really stuck out to me was you saying everything's possible. You know, sometimes it's just about thinking a little bit differently or asking the question, putting it out there. We may get told no, but maybe it's asking it anyway. And I don't want to make any assumptions either about how easy or difficult, challenging that may be. But I think, like you, I find it very interesting to think about. And thank you, DJ, for prompting the question of how much control would one have in a situation like that. Knowing what many of us know about service organizations in the disability support field, should you choose an organization, oftentimes you're not in control. As the service user, you're not afforded sometimes the opportunity to even interview the people who will ultimately come in and be providing you assistance. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who say that absolutely makes no sense. How could we even think about continuing that practice? Yet for thousands of people in the system, it's happening right now as we're having this webinar.
How do they know what I need, right? How do they choose the right person for me? How do they know what I need? It's always been very striking to me. So I've happened to meet these people with injuries a lot like mine. And so I think I know what their life is like. I don't. Every single person is different, and the things they need and the supports they rely on are different. And the only person who knows what they need is them. The only person who knows what I need is me.
Thank you for that, Caroline. Leslie has another few questions. Mm-hmm. In line with staff persons and you being under self-direction, do you offer paid time off to your staff, employee health benefits, or reimbursement to your personal staff?
So I do a few things, and I think some of these supports have also cemented our relationship. And I'll have to preface this by I'm advantaged by having some means, some financial means to do some of these things. But I do pay the employees part of the Social Security wages, so they don't have to have that FICA withdrawal from their earnings. And while I didn't offer like 2 weeks of paid time off every year or 6 months, I do now, and started that many years ago, especially when they're getting time off because I'm out of town, for example. It's not their fault that I've left, and why should they go without their earnings just because I went on vacation? And so I do cover that. Things come up in families, and sometimes ends don't meet. And so I've tried to help them make ends meet when unexpected catastrophes happen, like the housing meltdown, for example. And so there are kind of indirect benefits that I try to provide when I can. The one thing I really regret, which I don't have the means to provide, is a health insurance plan. I have looked into it a number of times, and there's just nothing I can do that I would be able to maintain. So my second best is trying to help folks get on Obamacare when I could, or if they have questions about their policies, or what could they choose, or what could they do. I try to help in that way. And for a while, when folks were able to purchase their own coverage, but needed it to be kind of one of those automatic transactions, because if the money was in their wallet, they'd spend it. So I would pay the insurance premium just directly from their earnings instead of giving the money to them and then having them give it to the insurance company. I would just function as a little bit of an escrow account, basically, for them. And that worked out in some situations too.
Great.
And it's part of the thing, right? Help when you can, give back when you can in the ways that you can.
Absolutely. And Leslie continues, providing some context. I ask because the person who I work for, her guardian has set up her business to include paid time off for major holidays, sick days, and vacation. Because of my commitment to my client, I often lose both vacation and sick time. And so I wonder if you were aware if DDA will allow you to lose or use the time, DDA being a state developmental disability agency that funds services for people. So I don't know if you want to respond to that. You said in the beginning you're paying privately for the services, so your situation would be different perhaps than, or it sounds like it is from the person Leslie is working for. But I think some of the insights, the examples that you've provided can provide some insight. And Leslie has said, thank you very much. Health insurance, very creative. Thank you.
Yeah, it pains me that I'm an employer that doesn't provide health insurance, but it's just the unfortunate reality. I just can't. So I help out where I can.
DJ has asked, what would you tell your younger self or someone just starting out with self-direction? Where and to whom would you recommend someone go first as they're starting out?
So I think what sort of set me on my happy path was finding this independent center in Northern Virginia. And so it's organizations like that, organizations like this one. I would start seeking out connections with organizations that are doing this work. And I'm not sure how the Alliance works if you, let's say, maintain a list of care and support people who are looking for work. But once you can find organizations that have that, then you can start, being the employer and conducting interviews and sort of laying out for people what your needs are. And so I would look for organizations in my area that were providing assistance in independent living. And the centers for independent living, there's hundreds of them across the country. And you can find all of them online now, and find the one that's closest to you are a good place to start. Some of the tips I have already talked about. I would encourage people observe in their new relationships with attendants that they've hired and are directing on their own, which is to decide to yourself what's really important and let other things go, to try and build relationships so that your care isn't just a business transaction, it's kind of coming from the heart. And, to be appreciative and express it. Tell people thank you like multiple times a day. Sometimes in the morning, someone's getting me up and we're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm so tired. But the only thing I'll say all morning is, thank you. And that's okay, right? It doesn't always have to be about having a heart-to-heart conversation, but it does always have to be, I think, about respect and kindness. And that has to be both ways too, right? If one of my ladies, for example, was not respectful or kind to me, you know, that's not going to work out either. So it is a two-way street. I don't mean to say at all that one should compromise your own needs in order to maintain a relationship that isn't really working out for you. It's not easy for me to let people go, but I have had to do that twice. And it was made a little more difficult because, as I mentioned, all of these folks know each other and all sort of sprouted as limbs on the family tree from my first aide. And so, you know, firing her sister was a difficult thing, but had to be done.
Couple more.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Caroline.
I guess I was just going to say, so younger self, be clear on what you need, and be on the lookout for organizations that can help. Be on the lookout for neighbors and have relationships with them. Try living in a multi-unit housing. Seems to really have worked well for me. And one final thing is, you know, if something is working out, it can be very difficult to let someone go when you're wondering to yourself, but how am I going to manage without them, right? If I have no caregivers on deck and I let everyone go tonight, I don't really know how I'm going to go to bed tonight. However, with planning, there are always other people who are available. And I happily have not been in this kind of dire situation where I'm not being taken care of properly, but it's better than nothing. It's really important, I think, to not be afraid to say this isn't working out. And there are ways to figure out how to get around and how to get your needs met when you have to let someone go.
Thanks, Caroline. DJ added a few more. Were the organizations more helpful or the individuals you met who were further along in their journeys than you were?
Thanks for that question. So ECNV, it was that list that really got me started on my journey. And truth be told, it was people I met along the way after that who kind of showed me the way forward, especially in this area. I haven't looked to ECNV for much more than that, even though I know they're available for much more than that. I was actually just kind of checking out their website this morning, and they have, you know, a fleet of mobility equipment that they can offer to people who are in need, basically for free. So there are lots and lots of services that they or other organizations can provide. I didn't use them because I didn't need them, basically, but they're there. And that said, personal relationships, and especially from people who are on a similar journey as you are, I think, even more important.
Right, and DJ had said, or maybe what's the difference between what each can do to help? And I think you provided an example of that. So centers for independent living really are, you know, amazing resources in one's community. And thank you for speaking about that, because you've given me an idea for something that the Alliance can potentially follow up on. I don't know if there's a national database, and maybe others on this today, if you do know of, a national system where someone can go and say, hey, in Maryland, here's all the centers for independent living in Pennsylvania and Iowa and California. So it's something to think about.
So I had a feeling that this might come up today. And so literally about 10 minutes before the webinar, I was Googling Centers for Independent Living, and I came across a site that does have a map of the US, and you click on your state and it shows you where the CILs are, Centers for Independent Living, are in the state. And so I think it's pretty easily acquired in Google.
Great.
And I'd be happy to, get the link I found to you, Marion, if that would be helpful.
That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you, Caroline. And I know we are looking at 4 minutes left. It's, the time goes so quickly.
So fast.
And it's time well spent. Are there any quick questions or comments from any of the other participants who didn't put it in the chat, but would rather ask it? Okay, well, interrupt me because I'm going to keep talking because now we have 3 minutes left, but questions are certainly important. We also want to encourage those of you who are on the call today, check out the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Supports. It's an organization that was founded in 2016 for exactly a lot of the reasons that Caroline raised today. People who use services, people who seek to provide services in very person-centered and self-directed ways, have no place nationally. Well, now they do because the Alliance is here. But back in 2016, we didn't have a place. And there were a couple of us that had kind of found each other and said, look, there's no provider association. Yes, there's self-advocacy organizations, but we want a place where we can really come and build resources and build capacity around self-direction. Because all of us at the Alliance really believe that self-direction should be available to anybody who wants it. And unfortunately, even in 2020, we're still not at a place where many states recognize in their funding priorities the importance of people being in control of their own lives. And Caroline, you have presented such an amazing example of somebody who's doing it. And I think we all appreciate that you openly talked about the challenges, but also the word possibilities keeps coming back. And I think that you've really helped us to see that there are things that are possible, even when it seems that it might not be. I think your discussion about how you help to figure out health insurance possibilities for the people who are working for you, I'm sure is greatly appreciated by your employees, but also I think has really sparked something in some of us to think about how we think about these things to really make self-direction sustainable and possible for everyone who wants it. I think there's some new things in the chat that I'll share quickly. Santa says this was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Santa.
Anne and Jillian say, thank you for sharing your story. DJ says, I am so grateful, Caroline, for your contributions today. And I love you for being such an essential guide and close friend in my personal life.
Well, I'm very grateful, DJ, to you for inviting me to do that interview some months ago, and then for making this opportunity available for me. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with the Alliance in this regard, and I'd love to be able to help in the future if there's anything I can do.
We would love and appreciate that, Caroline. And before we end, will everybody please say a big thank you to Rain for volunteering her time and capable expertise. Rain, we cannot thank you enough. Thank you. Okay, everyone, please be well, stay safe. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, we hope you're going to celebrate with only the people you happen to live with this year.
Yes,
So,
please.
we ask so that we all stay well and we continue to move through this pandemic. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you again to Caroline. And we hope to see you all at other Alliance events. And DJ is saying, is there anything that would have made this webinar more accessible to you? So anything quickly that people can possibly say, or follow up with us, because we really are seeking to make sure the accommodations are there so that anyone and everyone who wants to be a part of the Alliance is able to do so. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Happy holiday.
Bye-bye.